Hello, everyone. My name is Egidio Nascimento. I'm here with Peter Adrians, and we've got another episode of the story behind the painting. And we'll be looking at a special collection that Peter has. It's we referred to this episode as the Viscondessa collection, and you'll understand why when we get into it. But before we do, in case some of you have not are not familiar with Peter, just a bit of background on him. Peter is a philosopher, painter, entrepreneur, and in his spare time, musician and restaurateur. He wears many hats. Also an author. We haven't mentioned that before in the introductions. Peter has written several books on artificial intelligence and data mining as well. And his one of the books that's coming out this year in English is going to be Painting for the Brain, which is very much on topic with the episodes that we're releasing. And so, for those of you that don't know, Peter and his wife Rennie have been on Saint George for quite a few years now. They were their destiny brought them to the Azores back in the early 2000s, about 20 years ago, and they fell in love with the islands and have made it their home and now live there. Peter has a studio as well. It was a converted an abandoned cheese factory in the Frixie of Saint Antonio on St. George Island. It's called the Atelier de Casse Fabrique, which literally translates into the workshop of the cheese factory. And Peter has a workshop on the ground floor, and then on the top floor, he has a gallery where he displays some of his art. Another place that he displays some of his art is at the restaurant. It's now called Menezinho Art Restaurant in the Frixie of Ursulina. So you can see some of his artwork there. And so, as I said, today's series or episode is on the Viscondessa collection. And this is a picture we've used in a couple of the videos. And today, this episode is actually on this painting. And just a bit of background, I actually met Peter back in 2018. And I think it was 2018, actually, where we went and visited the cabanas de Viscondessa in Ribeira do Nobre on St. George Island. And it was just in the process of being built under construction. And the picture that I took there with Peter in front of the painting, it was kind of a work in progress at the time. And it's going to be, I think, the first painting that we're going to go through, just showing you some pictures here on the cabanas de Viscondessa. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, that's the painting there in the background that we see, which is this one here. So, Peter, with this, I'll turn it over to you, and you can provide us some insights on some of these paintings.
Yes. Thank you for the introduction. Also, okay. So here you see the painting. You see the Viscomdessa sitting in front of her summer home in Ursulina. Her main dwelling was in Velas, but apparently the noble families went in summer to here to Ursulina and Manadas. This is actually Manadas, not Ursulina. As you might read, and if you're interested in the history, you can get a good impression of how they lived from Mau Tempo no Canal, the famous novel by Vitorino Nemesio. So, and actually, he talks about noble families living in Manadas and going to Velas and stuff like that. So it's probably not historic figures, but so a couple of years ago, my friend George Silveira, who is not owning this house. The family owns this house, but occasionally he lives in this house. And he came to me. I said he said I have a new touristic project. I'm gonna build holiday homes in one of my pieces of land that the family owns, and it's gonna be a high class venue, top class, and I want you to make watercolor for every house that we have on the premises. And I also want you to make a painting of I think it's his great great grandmother, no, don't know exactly. She was born in 1837 and she died in 1921. So, and there's a vivid recollection with the older members of well, nobody, let's say, really remembers her, but of course, my good friend Manny Souza, who lives one house next to me here, my neighbor, remembers that in his youth he was still afraid to buy this house because this Viscomdessa was quite a personality. And if on the island, older people, if the wind pushes the door open and it's like some ghost enters the room, then people say the Viscomdessa is entering. So and there's loads of other stories about her. Maybe it's at some other, no, let's say, uh, occasion we talk about this. But okay, so George said, I want this. People then make kind of impossible demands on the painter. So I said, I want the water pump on the image. I want the house in the image, and I also want the Viscomdessa in the garden. And then I said, okay, that's a good idea. But what's she doing there? You know, she doesn't seem to be a lady that is just. So I suggested to him. So let's suppose that she is working. Asked her servants to put her table outside, and is working in the shade on her accountancy or whatever she's doing, or her household administration. And a visitor enters, and she looks up. That's the scene I
Mhm.
was. And we
Mm.
took all kind of historic. The bell to ring for the service is actually from the ink pot that's on the table. The glass is all from that time. I took painting pictures of George himself sitting there because I needed the figure to put it in space. And actually, you see that actually you seem to be a really tall person because you're standing much higher than she is sitting. Now, she was not a very tall woman, but actually the entrance to the garden is a bit higher than the actually location of the level of the lawn. So that's why you're looking down upon her. And during the design of the painting, I found out that I had all these nice. I took a lot of pictures from the garden, and I also had historical pictures of the Viscomdessa. I'll show them to you. But I found out that there's this large tree in the garden, and when the sun shines through it, it makes this extremely interesting, almost fractal uh, display of spots on the lawn. And I thought, wow, this is a great challenge to really paint that in the right way with all the play of the light on the leaves of glass and this lady in front of it. So I worked on that, and well, it came out pretty good, and it gives an enormous impression of depth. So there you are. This painting was originally well, it was meant to hang in the reception room of the Cabanas de Viscomdessa, where it is. We've got, of course, I looked into the history of the family. So here is the Viscomdessa herself with one of her daughters. And you can see here she's having her birthday. And you can see already, it's quite interesting for me, a musician. There's people playing, there's padres. We know actually all the names of of the people that are on this painting, but it would carry too far to talk about this. But she seems to be a very stern but a lively lady. She was a widow for years already when these photos are taken, I guess. And so I got an impression of what she was, which I needed to make her project, sorry, her portrait. And then I also George asked me to make paintings for or watercolors for all of the little houses on the cabanas. Well, here's the first one. This is actually the Solar de Viscomdessa, so the house where her summer house. And basically, if you see the windows with the red balconies there, at the bottom of that, just behind that, there's a little gate, and that is the
Mhm.
gate. If you go through there, you see the image
The painting.
that was or the subject of the other painting. So this was actually a watercolor I did just for the Viscomdessa. Here you see it's difficult to see nowadays because it's there's a building in front of it or a structure in front of it. But this is the main dwelling, as I understand it, for the from the family in Velas, on probably what was maybe carnival or a sopa for a festivity. So you see lots of people in front of it. You see the family and the ladies of the family enjoying the festa from their balcony, and
Mhm.
you see all these rich tapestries and cloths that traditionally they make in the Azores, and they always hang them out as a display of richness and a display of joy for the viewers to from their balconies. So I thought it was nice to make this one too with all the people in front of it. But this later on the house was sold, and now it's the Casa de Misericordia. There's schools in it. There's other facilities in it, but it doesn't belong to the family anymore. So basically, George asked me to make paintings of all the interesting houses, or some of the interesting houses, not all, of the family. This is, I believe, a house that belonged to what's his name? Where is he? It's João Teixeira Soares de Souza, and he was a famous intellectual. He collected songs, song titles, song texts from the island, which were in the 19th century, edited by Teófilo Braga, the first president of Portugal. A very interesting persons, a very interesting family with a real rich history, and maybe on some other occasion I tell more about it. This was his house. He was living here more or less as a monk, studying all
Mhm.
day in his library and writing about the history of the island and doing his researches. So
Very interesting.
next, please. Next, please. Okay, this is a house that is still also owned. I think it's a nephew or cousin of George. This is owned by Orlando de Noronha. He's a lawyer here. It's a very beautiful house, and the chapel that's here in front of the house is belongs to the family, and the chapel is used for concerts. Orlando organizes concerts there a couple of years, a couple of times each year. Very beautiful classical music and an extremely exquisite location to enjoy that kind of art on the island. This is one of the great joys of being on such a special island. The house itself is very special in terms of construction. It was one of the first houses that was built more or less earthquake proof. With special interesting techniques, and if you have time to have a look at the house from the outside at some point in time, I think Orlando is creating an alojamento local. So also there, in some future, there might be a possibility to really enjoy a nice long weekend or a week on such an exquisite location. But I made this watercolor from the meadows, and there's actually a large portion of land that still belongs to this Solar de Noronha. Okay,
And
so
I
that's
noticed
a
there in the foreground there beside the house, I think at least from here, it looks like a dragon tree, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So I also, if yeah, these dragon trees. This is dragon tree, and it's in front of the house, and it's actually I needed some kind of composition, so was sitting in the shade and doing the sketches for this watercolor. So this was a unusual view of the house
Mhm.
that I took, but I think it came out quite nicely.
Very nice.
I'm not sure actually. This is the chapel is from Santa Catarina, which is a home from the elderly, which also used to belong to the family. I forgot to which lady or saint the chapel is dedicated, but I thought it was a very nice view, and I really enjoyed the part on the left side of the watercolor where I had this depth of the foliage. I think
Hmm.
that came out quite well, and also there's a besides the chapel on the right side of the roof, you see a little rooflet or a little gate, and that's actually where the bell of the chapel is hanging in. And when I with my Dutch my Dutch background, it reminded me very much of Zorro, the you know
Yes,
the
yes.
American hero on his. I was actually expecting him every to pop up
To
on the
appear.
wall and jump on his horse from this wall. But okay, that's also a location that George asked me to do, and this is what came out. This was actually quite a job. It's the Palaceta. Palacetes. I've got the name here. Oh yeah, Palacetes Silvera and Paulo. It's in Angra, so it's a bit odd because it's another other island, Terceira, in Angra. So one of the members of the family was actually married to, I think, a daughter of the Viscomdessa, or maybe a sister. I'm not sure, but and I think he got very rich, extremely rich, with mining enterprise in Africa,
Mm.
and you know he could afford to create this kind of dwelling for himself. I love the architecture. I specifically had pleasure um, uh, making the painting the little tower on top of it. You see, there's a balcony
Mhm,
there. There's
mhm, mhm.
colored windows. It must have been. It still exists. It's in use as a. It was a school or something like that, and now I think it's an office building from the government. But it's a delicious. I'm not sure what the architectural style is, but it's a delicious. I would say Baroque. Well, not really
Mhm.
Baroque. It's more classicistic 19th century building that also belonged to the family. So I had great pleasure, and normally I don't really like, because I'm a kind of guy that likes to do some brushworks, and this is all very meticulous. All the
Mhm.
perspective and all the constructions and the windows have to be correct. So these are very labor intensive watercolors, but I had joy painting them. So that's the
It's
collection. That's the collection for the Cabanas de Viscomdessa.
it's a beautiful building and a beautiful painting as well. From your book, the way you have end the book, is you telling the story of someone asking a painter about how long it took to do a painting, and
Yeah.
then his answer was it took 40 years. And so I know normally I wouldn't ask you, and we haven't in some of the other videos, but in this one in particular, because of the attention to detail and the amount of detail that you have here, can I ask how long did this one take to paint?
No, I'm not completely sure, but okay, you start. So the sketch already takes about a day, and then you have to build up the sky in the background. And the research, actually, I had to go to another island. I had to look at the background, because this is s- this is supposedly the way the Palacio looked, more or less, when it was built in the 19th century.
Oh, I
But
see.
at this moment, it's in the middle of a heavily populated neighborhood. So the research took days, and a trip to another island, and then the painting itself. Of course, then you have to select a good photo with a good view. Then the potload, you do a sketch in pencil, which takes a lot
Mhm,
of time, because you have to take all the measurements. And then the first thing I do is do the air in the background, because
mhm,
that's a really wet job, and you have to take care that you don't reach the other parts of the drawing, because they, in watercolor, you cannot make things more light than the paper you're working on. It only can be darker. So if you know that the final parts of the painting have to be light, you have to kind of be
mhm,
careful not to touch them at all during the painting process, because they have to shine out, being completely without color. Yeah, I think by and by the whole thing took me a week.
Wow, very nice, very nice, and we appreciate the added detail there on the whole process and painting of this painting itself. So very much appreciate that, and that actually brings us to the end of this episode. So Peter, once again, thank you very much for taking us behind the story or behind the painting and telling us the story behind the painting. And if anyone is interested in seeing more of Peter's paintings, we've put up the website address where you can see the over 1,300 paintings that he has on the website. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to tell these stories. I think it's a great way to actually help people to understand where the paintings come from and why they were made. So thanks a lot.
Very good. See you next time.
Bye bye.